Outside of St. Elmo's Steakhouse, there's a 4-inch by 6-inch brick that's got my name on it. So I call that real estate. And it might be only 2 square feet. Let's see, that'd be 4 times, that'd be 24, it'd be two square feet. But I consider it home for me when I go to Indy. I go by and make sure my brick is all cleaned off and in good shape. My favorite Masters memory. Look, I was there when Jack won that historic sixth green jacket. I was a 26-year-old kid, 3.5 years out of college, scared to death, shaking like crazy, could barely get my mouth to move to get the words out. I mean, it was a big assignment for someone of that age, at least it was for me. And of course, I was there for Tiger's win for the ages in '97, Phil's first win of a major championship in '04 when it was his time, as I call it. Tiger again in 2019, our most recent Masters 19 months ago, when I call it Return to Glory. Those are all wonderful, historic events. They're epic events that will live forever. But my favorite one, Susan, was 1992. One of my roommates from college, there were four of us who lived together all through school at Houston on the Houston golf team.
Freddie.
And yeah, I see Rob's talking about the shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's. It's awesome. The cocktail sauce, especially. Um, the dream for me was always to go, as I mentioned, to one day get a chance to work for CBS. And the hook was the Masters tournament and the way they presented the NFL. I was in love with those two sports. Summerall and Brookshire, Summerall and Madden, CBS and golf and the Masters, the music, the Augusta melody. I mean, I just wanted to tell stories. I didn't want to be on TV. I just wanted to be there to try to capture it if I could. Just like the voices of my youth enraptured an audience that included me. So Freddie had this one goal, Fred Couples, of one day winning the Masters. My goal when I stepped foot on campus was to one day broadcast the Masters. So we were connected, and we talked about it all through school. And I studied communications, and I had some great opportunities and some breaks when I was still in college. So I had a little tape recorder that I would run off to cover the major sporting events that came through town, working for the CBS radio and television affiliates. And I'd come back to the dorm room and play these clips, these post-game interviews with all the players and coaches, and the guys couldn't believe it. But with that little recorder, we used to practice the green jacket ceremony. I was the host for CBS. Freddie had won the Masters. Again, it's like crazy. What are the odds? But April the 12th, 1992, it happened. And just like we had play acted it, playing pretend as college kids, now we were doing it for the whole world, to the United States and 206 countries and territories around the world. Saw two guys that were sitting there ready to burst out in tears, just barely able again to hold on to it, to conduct a professional interview. And this time we were doing it for real. We had done it for ourselves, and on this occasion, the whole world was watching. The week before is interesting. The week before the Final Four was in Minneapolis. Duke won for the second year in a row, back-to-back championships. And Freddie and Blaine McAllister, who was another one of the roommates, one of the four, who won 5 tour events, they came to the Final Four in Minneapolis and worked as my runner on the Saturday, running and get stats and popcorn and Cokes and whatever I needed or Billy Backer needed. And we talked that week about you're number one in the world this time, Fred. Next week, it's finally going to happen. It's going to happen for real, just as we practiced it years ago. And I just saw Paul say something in the chat room about the power of visualization. I am 100% into that. And that is what that message is. Because we were kids in college who had really large dreams. And like no one was going to allow us to deviate off the path of what we wanted to do. I mean, I was absolutely obsessed. And I know that's not necessarily sounds like a positive word, but I was obsessed with the idea of working for CBS. And I would do anything in my power to gain an experience, to get a chance to try to incrementally get better at my craft. And Freddie was just as driven to win the Masters. And so was Blaine to play on the tour. And John Horn, who was our fourth, who played 2 years on the tour. They all had a very big dream. And that dream was met with support. We lifted each other on our shoulders. I truly wouldn't have the career that I've been so blessed to have if it wasn't for my roommates in college. They made me believe it was possible to happen. They didn't make fun of me. Like today, and I'm not trying to sound like one of these guys that's, out on his lawn here, but it's just a cultural thing today. It's just as time's gone on, maybe social media's led us down this path, but when people set goals or say they want to achieve something, it's often met with a skeptical eye. There's doubt and there's ridicule that comes with it. And I see it. I'm in the television business. We got a lot of people that, sarcasm goes a long way. It's one of the pillars of comedy today, I guess, is what it's often based on. But when you're in college and you're at that important age, about to step out in the world, and you know what you want to do, man, it sure is nice to have the guys that you live with and your best friends who are telling you the whole time it's going to happen. And I'm telling them it's going to happen for them. And that power of positivity between us was huge, just huge for me. Again, just 3 years out of school, I'm auditioning for the network in New York. And as fate would have it, Fred was visiting my house when I got the call to go to New York as one of 5 to audition for an opening at CBS Sports. And it's just, again, I wouldn't be there if I didn't have people that had that kind of outlook on life. There's a lot to be said for it. If we could ever get the shift back for the next generation. I'm a father of 3. I try to be upbeat and positive. I try to be a realist, but I'm not shooting down anybody's dreams, ever. I deal with it every week. I'm going to have this Cowboys game this weekend. Dallas against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's undefeated. That's the main reason it's our number 1 game, but the Cowboys are a huge television draw. And the starting quarterback's going to be starting for the first time. It's either going to be Cooper Rush for the Cowboys or a guy named Garrett Gilbert. This is going to be something they prepared their whole lives for. We're talking to them later today. You know what? I can't wait to see them go out there and try to achieve it. And I can only imagine the excitement they have. They're going against the best defense maybe in the league on a big stage. I mean, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. I happen to have the Cowboys quarterback sitting next to me, former quarterback Tony Romo. But I root for people to achieve that dream, to achieve that goal. And I'm going to see it again firsthand this week, and I'll see it the next week at Augusta. If somebody's going to win that green jacket for the first time, trust me. When they come in Butler Cabin and I'm there to give them the green jacket, I'm going to be very sensitive and aware of the fact this is something that they have played around in their head for their entire life. They have been standing on over a 4-footer on practice greens since they were little boys, dreaming they were trying to make a putt to win the Masters. And I can't wait to try to represent them in the best fashion possible that expresses what's in their heart at that moment. That I feel like is my responsibility, to do justice for them to that moment that they have strove for their entire lives.
Thanks, Jim. Great stories and great words of wisdom.
Thank you.
We've also received a lot of questions and envious questions about your backyard par 3.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the hole in your backyard?
Well, it's just a few steps from me here, and I was out there earlier today trying to just hit a few balls with my little boy, who is I don't know where he gets the game from, but he has got some amazing talent. I'm just ripping the pictures off the walls. I don't normally take them down, but here's the story. I live in Pebble Beach, California. Got married on the 7th tee. 7th hole was a 106-yard downhill par 3, maybe one of the top 5 most famous holes in the world. So we got married there. Now we this was a dream too. My whole life I wanted to live in Pebble Beach, California. It came true in 2012. So I had this backyard space that we were throwing a lot of water on the grass and everything, and water bills out here are astronomical. And I looked at it for a long time and said, I got to do something with this that makes sense. I'm going to put a green in, and so I don't have to water it and irrigate it and waste all that money. But number 2, there's a rise and a hillside that if I move some dirt around, I can create an experience that's like the 7th hole. So I built a replica of the 7th hole. I told my wife for our 3rd anniversary, this is years ago, I was giving her our wedding chapel. I was building our wedding chapel in the backyard. that it had nothing to do with golf. But we spent 8 months building it, shaping it. I wanted it to be 50% to scale. I wanted every putt on the green to be identical to the putt on the 7th green. I wanted the vertical drop to be 50% of the drop. It's 50%. Green space is 50% of the size. I got golf balls that are modulated to go 50% of the distance. So when you stand on the tee, you are playing something that feels totally like the 7th hole. And you know what? It was the best thing I've ever done. And not only do we have some fun with it, but it's just worked out to be a really cool place to run some charity events. And it sounds crazy, but I mean, I'm always trying to figure out ways to spread more awareness and more money directed toward Alzheimer's research. And we have raised truly millions of dollars on this golf hole in my backyard. And this I like to show. I don't usually rip it off the wall. But that is my dear friend, Arnold Palmer, about to hit those 2 golf shots. The first one, he hit it up here on the hillside. You know, he wasn't loose or anything, and Arnie had a cocktail or 2. But that second ball, he knocked it about 1.5 feet from the cup. It was so close to going in. That's the only 2 he hit. And I have a big boulder that has plaques for every guest that makes a hole-in-one. It's called the Rock of Fame. How I would have loved to have had Arnie's name on the Rock of Fame. But I take solace in knowing it was confirmed. It was the last golf shot that Arnold Palmer ever hit in the United States. He would go a month later over to the 2015 Open Championship at St. Andrews and hit a ball off the first tee in a Champions exhibition they had there. It's the last place he ever hit a golf ball. But the last place he ever hit a golf ball in the States was in my backyard. So we've had some fun with it. Some of you may have seen Peyton's Places, this series that Peyton did for ESPN, where he's interviewing some of the real legends of the game. And he actually conducted his show with Tom Brady on the tee in my backyard. I was out of town covering a golf event in Hartford, the Travelers Championship, and I shouldn't mention Travelers, but I was in Hartford, and Peyton called and said, "Hey, I'm out of Pebble. I'm in an event that I'm supposed to be at, to be honest. And Tom's here, and I would love to be able to shoot the show in your backyard." So we did it. We've had Phil Mickelson make a hole-in-one, Tony Romo, David Faraday. Brant Snedeker's made it twice. There's Jack Nicklaus. There's a little better glimpse of the hole. That's my son Jameson. I've had Jack up there at least 3 or 4 different occasions. He's hit the flagstick a couple of times. He's never gone in. There's still another opportunity, hopefully around the corner, but he hasn't made it yet. Nick Faldo made it. Michael Wilbon made it. Ian Poulter, I may have said that, made it. I've got a great who's list that's tried, and you know it's funny. It got so much attention, which I was never looking for that to happen, but it's become a little bit of a strange thing. We live very close to the Pebble Beach Lodge, and people kind of figured out where the house is. And when I'm traveling all the time and leaving my wife and my kids and a big dog here at home, but we'll get people that ring the gate and they ask, they plead, "Is it okay? Can I promise I'll make a check to a charity, or I only want to hit one shot. I've come all the way from Seattle. I've come all the way from Boston. Can I hit one shot in the backyard?" And my wife is left trying to explain that they don't normally do that for strangers, but yeah, it's pretty fun.
Great stories. Thanks. And you brought up Arnold a little bit ago, and so we got a question from Bob Loisel of Trusted Insurance Alliance from Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Yes.
And Bob's question is with regards to Arnold Palmer. Arnie's his favorite player of all time, and is wondering what your favorite Masters memory of him is, or his influence on the Masters.
Oh, well, he was, he won the Masters every other year from 58 to 64, 58, 60, 62, and 64. And he was there in the age where television went from black and white to color. So he was the face of the sport. And he was just so he popularized the sport. He took it to such heights, John and Bob, that I don't know where the game would have been without him. He was such a special friend. I played dozens and dozens of rounds with Arnold, and we did many events like this, where we would travel around the country and do a little dog and pony show. I would just tee him up because he didn't like to make speeches. So if he got before a group at a convention, etc., he wanted to be sitting on a bar stool or a director's chair, and I would interview him. So he would get a speaking opportunity that he wanted to do, and he would say, Jim, are you going to be available to come to Baltimore in May? This is the date. And we'd work it out pretty often. I would meet up with Arnold, and we'd have a lot of fun. One of the greatest honors of my life, and it's a sad occasion in that it was his funeral, but I was asked by the family to present a eulogy for Arnold Palmer. Now, that is so big in my mind. That was about the most nervous I've ever been in my life. And trying to capture this man with his funeral being broadcast around the world. 2 different networks here in the States, Golf Channel and ESPN, went live with it was like a state funeral. I mean, Arnold was just so beloved. And I was more worked up about trying to get that right and not completely melting in emotion. But I adored the man. In so many ways. I'm really proud of it. I'll tell. Do I have time to tell a quick story, John? I think.
Sure.
I told this at the funeral, but in 2007, one of those years, I was doing the Super Bowl, the Final Four, and the Masters. When I finished the Masters, the next day, I got a call from the White House social office asking if I would be available next month to attend a state dinner honoring Queen Elizabeth. Now, sounds ridiculously crazy. Sports commentator talking like this. So, right up front, a full apology for the name dropping going on here. But this is true. It had been a lot of attention that I was in 63 days doing these 3 primary events. So, I thought it was a prank. I thought it was a joke. But it was for real. And May 7th, 2007, I went to Washington, and I was one of 135 people who were in the state dining room having dinner with the 43rd President of the United States, Mrs. Bush, and Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Yeah, what's wrong with this picture? I don't know. But I didn't know who else was going to be there. So there was a cocktail party in the East Room that preceded the dinner. And I walked around. I was so thrilled to see that Arnold was there. And we hung out for the hour in the reception, and then they would call you to come through to have a picture taken with the Bushes and the Queen and Prince Philip. That was pretty cool too. Was just being able to address the Queen, and I had a lot of build up where people were saying, "Are you going to have a chance to meet her?" I don't know how this works. I've never been to a dinner honoring Queen Elizabeth, but yes. You would go through the receiving line, and I got all these bits of advice about you should curtsy, or you don't touch her, or don't shake her hand, don't give her a hug. So, I was freaking out on how am I supposed to handle this moment. But when a Marine introduced me as the next one through, she stuck a gloved hand out like that, and of course I grabbed hold of it, told her it was a pleasure, and I went down, shook everyone's hand, and stood for the picture next to Prince Philip. Turns out our golf broadcasts on CBS are beamed live to the UK. We have, and I know this from the feedback I get, we have a big audience that watches our golf every week in the UK because we come on in prime time over there, 8 o'clock their time at night. So Prince Philip, as we're posing for the picture, leans over to me and says, do you play golf as well as you speak about it? Which, that was a shock. Prince Philip was aware of my work. So I kind of got into a little bit of a long-winded answer, and then he just kind of cut me off, says, that's enough, they're waiting for the picture. So I had to stop my story, smile, and then go on my way. And I got a place card, of course, by another Marine, and it said table 11. So I had been, full disclosure, at a previous state dinner once before in my life, and I had sat at table 12. And table 12 previously had been the table for the First Lady of the United States, and 11 had been the president. And I thought, there's no way I'm sitting with the president at this event. So I walked through some tables and chairs, and I come to table 11, and who's sitting to my left? Arnold Palmer. Also sitting at the table, again, I already apologized for the name dropping here, John and Gary. Justice John Roberts, Nancy Reagan. It was just another night out. But there were two open chairs opposite me. And I thought, oh my gosh, could this possibly? I can't get ahead of this. Is already way over my head. And now all of a sudden, some trumpets play, and in walks Prince Philip escorting Mrs. Bush to table 12. And then, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 43rd President of the United States and Queen Elizabeth. And everybody applauded, and they walked, and he walked right by me, holding on to her, and he leaned over and said, "Now, Nance, you're sitting at this table for a reason. Keep the conversation going." Okay. So they went over and sat opposite of us. I mean, Arnold was face of the president, right across a 54-inch round table, and I was shoulder to shoulder with Her Majesty. And I mean, it was bizarre. And I did my best to get everybody involved. Mrs. Reagan, unfortunately, she couldn't hear real well, and she was struggling a little bit to keep the conversation. But at one point, the president looked over at me, gave me the eye, and I said, Her Majesty, I must ask you, you were at the Kentucky Derby on Saturday. Did you have the winning horse? And she said, no. And then I asked her another question. It was a very clipped answer. And I thought, oh boy, this is a struggle here. And I think the president realized the Queen had no clue who she was speaking to. So he leaned over and tried to build up my credentials. And he said, that guy over there asking these questions, he's a friend. His name's Jimmy Nance, and he just did something never been done in the United States of America. He just called the Super Bowl. Of course, she probably didn't know what that was. But she put her fork down. We were eating the salad course. She put her fork down and gave him undivided attention. She would look at him, look at me. And he said, then he just did the championship of college basketball. And then he just did the Augusta, all in 9 weeks. And I thought, maybe she'll think that's pretty cool. And I was waiting for, the moment to be knighted with a butter knife or something. But she reached down for her fork and went right back into her salad again. And that was the end of it.
Not a fan.
A bit awkward. But she turned to Arnold and she said, Mr. Palmer, I have to ask you a question. How many people in your lifetime do you figure you've played golf with? Not how many rounds you played. How many people have had the opportunity, the blessed opportunity to play golf with you? And I thought, man, all these years I've done these events with Arnold, I've never thought to ask him that. So I'm sitting right next to him. I know Arnold can't hear. He's got the double barrel hearing aids going. And when she asked him that, all eyes suddenly turned to Arnold, and I knew he didn't hear it. And he looked at the Queen, and I had to help interpret it. And I said, Her Majesty wants to know. And he said, nothing. He just went like, and now she's kind of got an investment in this question. It's kind of sitting there. And out of desperation, she says, 100,000 people? And I said, 100,000 people? And he went, I always used to use his thumb, more. And she said, 500,000 people. And I said, 500,000 people. And we all were waiting for Arnold to say yay or nay. And he looked at the Queen and he went, just like that. He went, right. That was the answer. Arnold had played with 500,000 people. It was a great question. The night was incredible. What a blessed opportunity. I mean, I just still can't believe my good fortune. But about a month later, we're doing another event somewhere. And we're in a green room before we're going to walk out. And he said, boy, that was some night at the White House, wasn't it? And I said, yeah. He said, how about that question the Queen asked me? And I said, yeah, I've given it some thought, Arnie. He said, well, what did you think? I said, well, I hate to tell you, the math doesn't add up. He said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you came out of the womb, day one, they threw you a little diaper on you and you went out and they stuck a golf club in your hands and you played with 3 people day one of your life. But you never can count those 3 people again. I'll round it to 1,000 people in a year. Yeah. I said, well, you'd have to be 500 years old to play with 500,000 people. And Arnie looked at me and said, yeah, you know what? I think you're right about that. And so I told this story at his funeral. And the short of it is that Arnold didn't play with 500,000 people, but he touched millions of people. He had time for everybody. He was the most gracious, kind-hearted, normal guy who loved everyone, and they loved him, and he made everyone feel special. Such a gift. I can see all the great stars of today in sport, and they may be surrounded by their own security detail and other people that don't let you kind of get near them. And I look at Arnold Palmer and think, man, he was bigger than anyone, and he had time for everyone. Great lesson.
That's a great story.
Thank you.
Got another question here for you from Craig Hassinger from Siebert Keck Insurance Partners out of Fairlawn, Ohio. Minutes from Firestone Country Club, minutes from where I grew up. And Craig was wondering if there was a funny story that stood out from behind the scenes at the Masters.
Wow. I've been there a lot of years. Yeah, I'll give you one. My first one. Again, I was 26 years old, and Frank Trukinian, who was the founder of Golf Television, and I revered him. I just wasn't sure of myself, and he had assigned me to the 16th hole. And I went to him before the final round. I'd already walked out to 16 to see where the hole was located. It was in that sweet spot off the slope where there's a lot of action, and sometimes we see a hole-in-one on Sunday. Recently, we've seen many with that hole location. So I came back to the office and I said, Mr. Trukinian, I've got to ask you a question. I said, what would I say on the air if somebody made a hole-in-one today? And he looked at me and said, are you serious, son? I said, yes, sir. I want to know how to handle that because it's in this location and I know the odds. He said, this is a visual medium. You would say nothing. Now get the hell out of my office and get down to 16 and make sure you're on time for rehearsal. I said, yes, sir. And I took off running from the compound. I was always an obedient yes, sir, no, sir guy. That's the way I was raised. So, I'm still running along and I'm running through the 8th fairway crosswalk on my way to crossing 8 and 7 and getting over to 16 eventually. And one of the marshals stopped me at the course, said, hey, you, what are you, what's the big hurry? And I said something like, I can't be late for rehearsal or whatever. He says, I don't know what that means, but he said, we don't run around here. We walk. So I slowed it down to a brisk walk. I thought I may have already lost the return invite to the 87 Masters, but I climbed up into the tower and, mercifully, I survived it. Jack hit a shot in there that nearly went in. That was the occasion I was trying to be prepared for it. He spun it off the hill and it trickled just by the cup and settled about 3 feet below the hole. And I said nothing. I let the whole thing play. Partly because I couldn't get my mouth to move. My teeth were chattering. I was having a hard time getting anything to come up and out and leave the lips. And anyway, Frank never cut off of him as he walked around water's edge up to the green, and he stayed with the shot. And I may have mentioned the guy he was playing with, Sandy Lyle, and he had this for birdie, whatever. But now Jack's over the putt, and I just said simply, now for a share of the lead. And Jack knocked it in, and I said, there's no doubt about it, the bear has come out of hibernation. And he's brandishing his putter up in the air as he's walking toward the 17th tee. I still get chill bumps just like knowing that I saw it with my own eyes. And anyway, as soon as I said it, we still have more groups to come through. Norman, Sebi, Kite, and Jack, of course, would make a birdie at 17 and take the lead. But I began to be consumed with doubt, with self-doubt. I don't know where that line came from about the bears come out of hibernation. And I began to think I had just reused a line that had been already uttered on the broadcast because we had announcers at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. By the time it gets to 16, a lot of background anecdotal material has already been used. So anyway, I was beating myself up thinking I'd plagiarized the moment. And I walked back dejectedly to the compound and I went up to Mr. Trukinian to apologize. And I said, "What are you apologizing for?" He said, "You were just a part of maybe the greatest show in the history of golf." And I said, I didn't mean to relaunder the same line that somebody used earlier in the broadcast. He said, "What are you talking about? The Bears come out of hibernation?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Son, no one said it. Only you. You're going to be here for a while. Now get the hell out of my office again." And that was it. And I'm going back next week for the 35th time. So it's been very good to me. And the Masters is the ultimate. I mean, I know the Super Bowl is the biggest television event, and you guys are great supporters of our industry, and I'm so grateful for what Liberty Mutual does. But the Masters to me is the one that is the deepest in the heart. Let's just put it that way.
Great, thanks, Jim. I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to open it up for the audience. And Matt Ware, my good friend, will go ahead and ask you questions from the audience that are coming through in the chat. So the last question for me, Andy Prill of Hub Northwest out of Seattle. He was wondering how you prepare differently for announcing golf versus football versus basketball.
Well, I love that question. I'm in the midst now of day 4 of preparing for a football game. Now, you wouldn't think there's much involved in it other than just kind of climbing up in the booth and watching a football game and saying 2nd down and 4. But to me, it's not about the numbers. It's about the people you're covering and finding what's in their heart. That's what I kind of want to identify. But when you do a football game, you have what's called a spotting board in front of you. So I'm reading all week long. We have a research team, naturally, that every day sends me about 200 articles from all the NFL cities and all the national columnists, everything that's been written basically out there involving the NFL. My eyes are going to be on it and see it. And I take notes. And ultimately, when I do the game, I'm just ad-libbing through the game. I'm watching what's happening on the field, and I tell people what I see. And it has to be quick. There's no one telling me what to say. Because by that time, if I was to parrot what somebody was saying in my headset, it's too late. You know, it's that old class you had in school, extemporaneous speaking. And so when I call a game, you have a spotting board. All commentators do. This was my board from last week. I was Pittsburgh at Baltimore. And again, I'm not ever reading this, but I have it as a reference point. And I do have a spotter, making sure I know who made the tackle, who made the interception. The 3rd play of the game last week, Lamar Jackson was intercepted by Robert Spillane, who was filling for a guy that has been injured named Devin Bush the 2 games prior. Spillane is the grandson of a former Heisman Trophy winner named Johnny Latner from Notre Dame. So I have all that kind of anecdotal information on the board. When I go to a commercial and, you know, we're away and we're in a Liberty Mutual break, I can look down and say, you know what? I need to tell the story, on, how Lamar sees the Pitt rivalry and how it's a rivalry between not only the teams, but the cities and their fans, and how he grew up as a Dallas Cowboy fan, was his favorite team, but he loved watching the matchup of Pittsburgh and Baltimore because of all the physicality of the game and watching guys like Troy Polamalu and James Harrison and Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. So, I have all that. That's just a whole long list of stuff that ultimately just a little makes the board, the rest floating around in your head. So now this week, here's the board for this week's game. So I'm not in the final printout. I don't have, here's Ben again. I just had Steelers. I mean, the game could break out in my front yard right now. I'm ready to call it. I'm going to be honest. But I have this as a backup. Here's the Cowboy quarterback position. This guy, Ben DiNucci, started on Sunday night against Philadelphia, and they've already said he's not going to start. It's going to be one of 2 other guys. So I haven't filled in the starter yet. And we have Mike McCarthy, the Cowboy coach, at 5:15 tomorrow morning, my time. Before I get on a plane, I'll be on an hour conference call with him. So you prepare. And college basketball is just intense. Now for golf and the Masters, I have nothing in front of me. Nothing. It's all right up here. I have it in my head, and I deliver from here. That's the way I look at golf. I watch it as a fan. I know the background, particularly on the guys that have been around a long time. I could give you days on Tiger, Phil, etc. Dustin and all these guys, Justin Thomas. I don't need any background information on them. It's all recorded and cataloged in my head. But what's more important, I don't want to just say something to say something. I want to feel it. And golf is a great visual sport, and it also puts a demand on the commentator to speak more lyrically, more poetically. Not that you're a poet, not that you're in that slot the whole time, but it's a chance for a little more, I believe, higher quality commentary than you would in a fast-paced event where you're running from play to play and identifying tacklers and ball carriers and down and distance and rebounders and things like that. Golf is a storyteller's delight. So I don't want to be handcuffed with a bunch of notes. I just want to watch it and feel in my heart what that moment is and try to articulate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
So what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Matt to see. We probably have time for one or two questions from the audience, and I'll let Matt ask you those questions.
Jim. So I got a couple quick questions. First one's from Roland Galley. Ben Crenshaw won the Masters in 1995 after the passing of Harley Pennick.
Harvey, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was that like, or what are your memories from that Masters?
Well, he missed earlier in the week some practice time because he flew back to Austin. Harvey Pennick was his instructor, and Harvey died the weekend prior, and his funeral was the week of the Masters, and Ben left to go back to Austin, and then came back. No one really had Ben on their radar to win the event. He had won the event also in 1984. And Ben is a guy that it just, whatever he's feeling, it comes out. It pours out of him. And, I mean, you just knew as he found himself in contention after the first round that was a rich story, but probably won't hold up. But each day you got a little bit closer to this lasting to Sunday and what a script this would be. This is the amazing thing about Augusta. The scripts that are written there, I mean, as a commentator, it's just a dream. Sergio Garcia's never won a major championship, and that's never going to happen now. That chance has gone by. He wins the Masters, and whatever. Charles Schwartzel. I'm talking about stories that don't come to mind. First off, Charles Schwartzel birdies the last 4 holes in 2011 to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of his fellow countryman Gary Player becoming the first international player to ever win the Masters. That was in his heart at the time. He wanted to win for Gary Player. And we've been talking all week about it being the 50-year anniversary of the Masters going global, with Gary Player really introducing the majesty of the tournament to the rest of the world. So, Ben's story was a big one, and he made a putt on the 72nd hole. It was only about that far, and then he couldn't even take the ball out of the hole. He just fell over, his head in his hands, and wept. And it was heavy stuff. It was fantastic. I love Ben. He's a great friend. I miss him being out on the tour now. He's been gone for a while playing on the senior tour. But yeah, he's a great man, a great guy.
All right, thank you, Jim. If Chris Claus can unmute his phone, Chris played at Penn State for Joe Paterno, big athlete. Chris, or can you unmute? Ask your technology versus talent question, since Jim's.
You know what? A little discussion I had with some friends over the weekend, and we were talking about different eras of athletes and who had more talent. The athletes up to today, LeBron versus, maybe a Will Chamberlain or a Jim Thorpe, maybe over Usain Bolt. Jim, and let's, we could just restrict it to golfing. What is, what makes the players better today? Is it their talent, or is it the, the super sized head driver that allows them to drive it, 350 yards or 400 yards?
Well, first off, I want to know, what was your last year playing for Coach?
87.
What's that?
87.
87. I just missed you. I became CBS's college football lead announcer in 89 and did a bunch of Penn State games. Penn State, Alabama, Penn State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Pitt.
Would have loved to have had you in the Fiesta Bowl with Miami.
Oh, yeah, Miami. That might have been your last game, right?
That was my junior year. It was a redshirt.
Junior year. And you guys beat them 14-7.
something like that. It was
Look it up. 14-7. They came out with their battle fatigues on. I didn't do the game.
They came off the plane in their battle fatigues.
Yep. That was a great team. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good, you know, COVID ties against the battle fatigues, you know.
Yeah, you guys were awesome. Well, I would tell you this. I'm a big defender of the guys of yesteryear who didn't have access to the technology that kids do today. And we're sticking to golf here, you said. So, like, even to be able to have these TrackMan where you can watch your ball flight and the ball speed and the spin rate and all of this. I mean, Jack Nicklaus never had that. Jack Nicklaus had that, was competing today. Trust me, he would be winning a ton of majors. I'm always finding myself defending the guys that came before, because I feel like there's a natural knee-jerk reaction for everybody to think that what happened yesterday, or just most recently, is the best and biggest thing of all time. I got asked, by the way, in 2000, leading into 2000, you might remember ESPN had this Sports Century series where they had the greatest events, the 100 greatest athletes. I was one of 9 that voted on the greatest 100 athletes of the century. And I want you to know that there were 11. There were 11. 9 of the 11 voted for Michael Jordan as the greatest athlete of the century. I voted for Jim Thorpe. Mm-hmm. When I sent my ballot in, they were like, well, Jim Thorpe, where is that coming from? Well, I mean, professional football player, professional baseball player, Olympic champion. I mean, the guy did everything. And just because he competed 80, 90 years ago doesn't mean the guy wasn't a great athlete. I had Babe Dietrichson Zahari as number 2. And I had Michael in the top 10, but again, everybody looked at the list, and that ended up carrying a lot of weight as how it shook out in the end. I defended the old guard. So I would like to think that the difference between today's players and yesterday's players, and this holds true for every sport. Yeah, they've got the technology now. We have more means to get the feedback you need to get better. Videotape, coaching, nutrition, working out, it's all better. But there is no difference between Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods when it comes to a will to win and figuring out a way to win. They're equal. They're equal. And Tiger's awesome at trying to beat everybody and just giving every shot his all. So I would say there is no difference. There is a difference, though, in the means that today's athlete has to be good, and that's it. I think it comes down to right here, what's in the heart. And I think Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, these guys would have been, they would have been great players in this era. There's no question. It's not even the same game. The equipment, this sport is so vastly different. The golf ball, the clubs, and everything. But it's much deeper than that. It gets past the equipment. It has to do with what's in the heart.
Right.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Jim, I think we have one more quick question. G. Lindsay, can you unmute? You have a Sean Connery, the late Sean Connery question. If not, I'll ask it for you.
Yeah, so I was just curious. I guess I heard somewhere that you played with Sean Connery, and if so, you got any interesting stories? Obviously, posthumous for him, rip, Sean. But just, go ahead.
Yeah, this sounds absurd. He passed away this past weekend, and a golf writer found a story that was written in my book about a fateful day that I had with Sean Connery, and he wrote it, and it got picked up by the USA Today. And there was another one, too, that someone found some video from a book tour that I had 10, 12 years ago where I told the story. So it got some play this week. I was a little embarrassed about it, but here it goes. Early in my career, I was out here at Pebble. I didn't live here. I was doing the Crosby Golf Tournament, the AT&T as we know it. And I got invited to play golf at Cypress Point Club, one of the top clubs in the world. And I was told to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I walked into the pro shop and introduced myself to Mr. Langley, Jim Langley, the pro. And he said, "Oh, you're on the tee next." And he said, "And by the way, you're playing today with Sean Connery." I thought, you can't be serious. I was a huge James Bond fan as a kid. So anyway, I walked over. said hello to my foursome, and there was Mr. Connery, and he had his golf bag over his shoulder. He refused to caddy. He wanted to carry his own bag. I guess, that would fit everything right in line with Mr. Bond. But I, made a quick little comment to myself, take it easy. Let's not act like a fan. Let's act pretty neutral and normal here. So we're playing Cyprus, and everything's going great. We step on the tee at number 7, and Sean says, "Who has the honor?" Well, he had made par at 6, and I made bogey, and it just, without thinking, I said, "You do, Mr. Bond." And he kind of like looked back like, what the hell is this? And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry." I said, "Well, trying to save it." I said, it's number 7, sir. It should be very kind to you." So you had that raised eyebrow. He didn't say anything, but I've seen that look on in cinema many times. Now he had he was 1 over up to this point, and he hit a big rope hook, nasty looking shot, par 3 7th hole into the sand dune. I mean, it was like complete miss. And I could tell he was frustrated and upset about it. I wasn't sure if it was because of the shot or because I had made those comments. And I just shut up. And I went up and helped him find his golf ball. It was buried in a footprint and unplayable basically. And he miraculously hit the ball out onto the green some 40 feet away. It was a brilliant shot. And then over the putt, I was praying for it to go in, and that it did. It went in, and he looked over at me and had a big smile on his face. He says, "You were right, number 7." So I felt great relief. But at the end of the round, he had been dropped off. He'd taken one of the lodge shuttle buses over to Cyprus, and he said, "Could I get a ride back to the lodge?" Well, he and here's a name that probably few of you will remember. Howard Keel was in our group. He was on the TV show Dallas. He ended up getting married to Miss Ellie, but he was famous for being on Broadway, big baritone voice, showboat. I mean, he was a famous actor and singer in his time. Anyway, Keel wanted to ride back too, so I gave Mr. Keel and Sean Connery a lift, and I put their bags in the trunk, eager to try to do everything I can. I'm 27 years old or something, and Keel gets in the front seat. Connery gets behind the driver's seat, and now I'm saying, my head is spinning, man. You can't run off the road here on 17 Mile Drive. I got these 2 famous actors, both hands on the wheel, and I saw the door behind me was still ajar. It was open. So I gave it a huge shove to close it. What I didn't realize is that Sean Connery had his left foot still planted on the pavement. He wasn't completely in the back seat. And all of a sudden I heard this, "Oh, my effing leg." And he was just screaming in pain. And I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done here?" And then he got out and tried to walk it off, and he was hopping along, cursing, and I was so sorry, Mr. Connery. I can't believe I did that. And I looked down, and that tender spot right between the shin bone and the top of the ankle, there was blood on his trousers. The trouser was slightly torn, and was blood coming through. I mean, I had really, done something that Goldfinger and Blofeld had never done. I had injured and drawn blood from James Bond. But more importantly, I thought I had taken him out of the tournament, and I was afraid that this was going to be like a national story, and it might mean the end of my career once CBS found out. But typical of Bond's powers of recovery, he kind of walked it off, and hey, don't worry about it, Jim. I'll be fine. So yeah, but his pant leg was blood stained and soaked, and when I got back to the lodge 3 minutes later, I thought, well, you blew that opportunity. When all of a sudden he says, "Do you gentlemen care to join me for a bite of lunch?" So hey, I'm in. So we went to what is now the Bench, the lower restaurant off the 18th, the lower level restaurant. Back then it was called Club 19. And we sat outside on a sun-splashed day like I'm looking right now over Carmel Bay. And he ordered, again, I'm 27. He ordered grilled calamari. Now, I'm a young kid. I don't have the palate of James Bond, for God's sakes. And I actually said something stupid like, "Wow, what is that?" And he said, "Well, you should try it." So I ordered grilled calamari, and I was, much to my amazement, amazement and astonishment, out came this big squid on a plate, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it, but I got it down, chasing it with a glass of white wine. It was fantastic. And at the end, he said, "Do you ever make your way over to the southern coast of Spain, the Costa del Sol?" He was living at that time in Marbella. As fate would have it, I had been there like 5 months earlier, covering the World Swimming and Diving Championships for CBS. So I knew it, like I was, and I'd just been there. I had been there. So I said, "I was just there." He said, "Well, my home club is Valderrama. If you ever come back, you must look me up. I would like to host you." So I said, "I would love that, but how would I find you?" Remember, there were no cell phones at this time, and his last line was, "You can look me up, Jim. I'm in the phone book." I said, "No, seriously, I'm in the phone book under Connery, Sean Connery." And that was my day. No embellishment, none, with Sean Connery. That's the true story.
Oh, Jim, awesome tale. All right, I'm going to flip it back to John because I think we're at the end of time.
Thank you, man.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Good job. Jim, a big thank you. I know I can speak for everybody on the call today. We had a great time listening to your stories.
Thank you,
It was
guys.
fantastic. So everybody, please join me in a round of applause for Jim, or virtual applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thanks, Jim, and I'm going to hand it over to Gary Fisher for our close.
Appreciate you all.
Thank you very much. I think